the better half of Cocoa Beach, and then all the way down to Palm Bay. John Tobia represents District 31, which is the other half of Satellite Beach, and down to Indian Atlantic and Indian Harbor, and to West Melbourne and what is that? Southeast Palm Bay. John and I were both elected in 2008 and subsequently re-elected in 2010. We have done this together for a couple of years now, and on Tuesday officially starts the 2011 legislative session in Florida. In Florida, the legislature meets once a year. Session is 2 months, and committee weeks before that are about 2.5 months, maybe 3. So we try to do this beforehand, try to get the pulse, hear questions, take questions, answer questions, and primarily our staff is here to take notes, and so that we can take your thoughts and concerns with us to Tallahassee. John?
Yep, I think you guys should all have, if you have questions, question cards. The staff will be collecting those, and we got through each and every one this afternoon, so we'll hope to do the same here. We don't aim to censor or to do anything of that nature. We want to get through everyone's in as timely as a fashion as possible. For that reason, I want to go over these PowerPoints very, very, very quickly, just to let you know what potentially will be coming up this legislative session. Just some legislative principles. I think the first one's the most important. It says, do not increase taxes, and here's the big one, or fees. So that's extremely, extremely important.
Let's just read through those together. Encourage private sector economic activity, limit the scope of government, promote personal responsibility, advance the public safety, protect individual liberties, and strengthen Florida's families. That's set forth by the Senate President and Speaker of the House as the principles of this year. And the way principles work in Tallahassee is it simply means as a chairman of a committee, you are to weigh all legislation that comes before you against those principles. Next slide.
Okay, current budget one this fiscal year is $70.5 billion. We're facing a $4.5 billion shortfall this year. So unlike the federal government, we're charged with balancing the budget. So what we will be charged to doing is cutting out a little more than 5% of the budget this upcoming year if we don't plan on raising taxes and fees. That being said, where's this $4.6+ billion going to come from? And we get to the next slide. 95% of general revenue comes from education, healthcare, or criminal justice. So if it's going to come from somewhere, this is where it's coming. All that slushy other 5%, that's your agricultural and natural resources, general government, the stuff that gets us up there, as well as acts in the legislative fashion, as well as the transportation and economic development. So that's where our budget comes from. Rich going to run over some of his bills here for this legislative cycle.
Constitutionally, the only thing Florida legislators must do is balance the budget. That's what the Florida Constitution dictates that we do. Outside of that, everything we do is at the pleasure of the Speaker. One of the things that we can do is pass legislation. We can repeal laws, we can have new laws. And so a few of the bills that I'm running this year, the first one there is called Effective Public Notices by Government Entities. Since the dawning of time, Florida law has required that public notices be posted in the newspapers. Back when you were horseback and the only form of media was the newspapers, that might have been a good idea. But today it's nothing more than a $50 million tax dollar supplement for a privately owned companies called our newspapers. My bill would take them out of the newspapers and put them onto the website. And for those people that do not use internet, it would be mailed to your home if you requested it. The next few are all about jobs, aerospace jobs, tax credit, important for us with NASA downsizing. Enterprise zones, one here for Palm Bay, specifically research and development tax credit. Florida misses the boat in not subsidizing our companies to do research and development, because if they research them here, they typically manufacture here. It leads to more and more jobs. Exemptions from tax on sales, use, and other transactions. It's a really long name. I was asked for that last time. In manufacturing, you're not taxed on goods that you buy that are absorbed in manufacturing. We have a fledgling aerospace industry here where we're manufacturing more and more parts to aircrafts. And when you manufacture aircraft parts, you use a wax to mold. And when you make that part, the wax dissolves. Well, currently our companies are paying tax on that wax. Totals a couple $100,000 a year. That bill would give them relief from that, much like everyone else who buys stuff that is absorbed through manufacturing. I'm repealing a few outdated laws. I'm trying to anyway. A few of them have already passed the first committee reference. Some outdated laws are in this state it's illegal to ride your bicycle without two hands firmly gripped on the handlebars. Two hands, state law. It's a misdemeanor if you don't. We need to repeal that. It's a bit goofy because all the cool kids, drive with no hands, so we don't want to ruin that. Also, it is illegal in Florida to sell, possess, or whatever, clove cigarettes. I don't care about clove cigarettes except that they're sold at every store, but they're illegal. Oddly enough, we're going to remove that law. It's also illegal to cohabitate if you're not married. It's illegal to commit adultery in the state. Although I don't advocate either, I don't think that having that as a law is necessarily instilling anybody's liberties or freedom. So we're going to repeal some outdated laws this year, and that, Mr. Tobia, are my bills.
Okay, a couple quick ones here. NPMs, non-participating manufacturers, just to be clear, Representative Workman or I did not vote for the cigarette tax. I think it was a terrible, terrible bill, and we voted it down. That being said, there's a niche group of cigarette manufacturers out there that are not paying into the settlement or the master settlement, the federal one. So what my bill simply does is call on this niche market of cigarette manufacturers to pay into the settlement. It's a fairness issue. It's no new taxes. It's just there's an advantage out there to a certain group that I don't think should be there. That, by the way, will draw somewhere in the neighborhood of $90 to $110 million into our budget. Another one is local preference in contracting. This will limit sweetheart deals for local contractors. Conversely, local contractors then can go out and bid jobs in other municipalities and not have to face those trade barriers that they would otherwise potentially face because of similar sweetheart deals that Orlando or Melbourne may be facing. So that's local preference in contracting, and those are two of my bills. That being said, we wanted to get through this stuff extremely quickly. Mainly because we wanted to hear from you guys as much as possible. So that being said, Rich and I will rotate, and you want to run over how questions? I thought that was a pretty good way.
Your blue cards, we're not gonna read them first. We're just gonna read them out loud and try to take them. Couple things that we're going to try to avoid. We're going to try to avoid duplicating. So if it's the same question, I'll acknowledge you, but we'll move along. If you have a question, I need you to write it down. We're going to limit debate. If your name is on it and you want to follow up, we'll ask you to do that. If maybe we don't answer it, well, we want to make sure you leave here, even if you don't like the answer, that you have a full answer. But we're going to limit debate among members of the audience. So if you don't like what somebody else says, it's okay. It's America. We're allowed to have that. Yes?
Can you just put up the first slide?
Yes. We'll be right back. So if you have a question, as we go through it, if you have a question, just raise your hand and get a blue card, okay? So we'll start off with this one right here. Oh, this one's for me. For Rep. Workman. Number one, Medicaid is an issue for the budget. Would you be willing to sponsor legislation whereby Medicaid and medically needy patients assist in paying for the state portion of Medicaid in order not to cut any services for the afflicted community? Number two, would you be willing to put together a panel of Medicaid and medically needy recipients to come up with ways to eliminate fraud and abuse the Medicaid programs? Number one, Medicaid certainly is a budgetary issue. It's 33% of our total budget. It is huge, and Medicaid needy. We are, I'm not sure if I would be willing to sponsor legislation that has you pay on a monthly basis. I do appreciate the copay. I think a copay limits unnecessary office visits. As long as it's not onerous, we don't want to make our working poor or our poor folk have to spend more at a doctor's visit than they can afford. but I'll give you an example of a fix that we have to do in this state. Currently, Medicaid recipients have no copay for their eyeglasses if if they have eyeglasses. I think certainly that they should have access to eye doctors and eyewear, but you need to have some skin in the game. I don't want to belittle the point, but if you go to the mall and you forget your eyeglasses in the car, I don't want it to be easier just to go to the eyeglass store and get a new pair than walking back to your car. But $10 or $20 might prevent you and have you turn around. So there are fixes that will help you have a little skin in the game with Medicaid that will help defray the costs. I don't like the idea of having somebody pay on a monthly basis. Medicaid is a system where you're supposed to use it if you need it, not an insurance that could put an undue burden on our poorest families. Actually, there are a group a series of meetings taking place throughout the state. Senator Mike Karadopoulos has had them and is having them throughout the state. I attended many of them. They're much like this, a little smaller, typically a round table, a lot of providers, and then several of the actual Medicaid recipients are at the table, and the Senate President is acquiring all that data. And before we do anything with Medicaid, the results of those town halls are going to be part of that legislation. That's a really good, yes sir, that was your question?
Yes, it is.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, the problem with part of what you're saying, Representative, is first off, a Medicaid patient cannot get eyeglasses except once every 2 years, maximum. They can only get certain eyewear, and it doesn't matter if they even have a severe eye disease. They can still only get one pair every 2 years, even if they have a degenerative eye disease, which requires the prescription to change every 6 months. So I can understand your point, but it's not cheap and it's not easy. There are extremely few eyeglass providers in any county in this state that will participate in the Medicaid system for eyeglasses for Medicaid patients as it is.
Because we don't pay enough.
So it's trying to
Yeah.
for a Medicaid patient to get eyewear.
It's the same with dental. I mean, one of the problems with Medicaid is that the doctor makes such a fraction of what it costs that they're not willing to participate. I think a copay actually helps fix that problem at some level.
Now, as to the question itself, what I was saying, as I was talking to you earlier in the other meeting, my partner here, Mary Ann Stringer, and I, we walked the halls from 1998 on, trying to save Medicaid, especially the medically needy share cost program. And in 2000, we actually had a bill that was put in the hopper, which what we had proposed was Medicaid patients would pay, just like a Medicare patient pays a premium. A Medicaid patient would pay a premium of $15 a month. Now, right now, there are approximately 2.4 million patients, Medicaid users, in the state of Florida. If that $15, which is minimal, were to be paid, if you multiply that by 2.4 million, it comes up to $432 million
Bill,
a year.
I appreciate what you're saying. What I want to do is wrap that up, and you and I will get together, and as I mentioned earlier today, just because I don't want this to turn into...
Fine, but one last point. The issue on the second question is you will never, no disrespect meant to anybody, but you will never be able to weed out fraud and abuse as long as your blue ribbon panels are continually made up of providers and former legislators until you allow us to sit down and tell you...
Sir, I'm sorry that you weren't there, but the two that I sat at had about a half dozen recipients, and they spoke more than anybody else. So we are truly making that agenda.
No. The providers aren't going to tell you where
They weren't providers.
because they're the ones committing them.
Let's get, we don't want the, okay, I got you. John?
Okay, I gotta appreciate people that come prepared here, all typed up. During today's 1 p.m. town hall meeting, both representatives repeated the phrase jobs, jobs, jobs several times. Representative Tobia started that